What's going on, everybody? Happy Sunday and all that good stuff. So I've decided I'm going to start trying to do these junior dev power hours a little bit more regularly, but I've kind of been doing like a lot of conversations, a lot of one-on-ones, which has been great, to be honest with you. I love doing the one-on-ones. I don't necessarily know how long I can sustain it, if I'm being real, but it's given me a lot of ideas for things that I want to talk about. To be honest, I even made a brand new talk for like boot camps revolving around a lot of these conversations because I'm starting to realize like a reoccurring theme in a brand new area that probably wasn't as popular, I guess, or common maybe a year ago. So it's been good to kind of get that like brand new, fresh perspective on certain items and tasks and things like that. So we definitely have a lot to talk about today. I had some interesting questions coming. I always tell people, the Junior Dev Power Hour, if this is your first time at the Junior Dev Power Hour, or maybe you're listening to the recording, right? Because I don't really record these often, but I decided I want to record today's. And so the idea with the Junior Dev Power Hours, it's very, very focused, meaning the ultimate goal is number one, if you have a blocker in some way, shape, or form, I want to help you move it. This is a community space, meaning it exists to help in any way, shape, or form. And the idea isn't necessarily to waste your time. It isn't to be in the space for 5-6 hours. The idea with this space is it's capped at an hour, right? We stop it at an hour. And my goal is by the end of that hour, the idea with this space is it's capped at an hour, right? We stop it at an hour. And my goal is by the end of that hour, you have enough reason, incentive, excitement, idea, enthusiasm to put your fingers on a keyboard and knock some code out, knock some blockers out, and get some stuff done. It doesn't benefit me any way, shape, or form to have you come listen to this stuff, feel good, and then you go back watching TV and you're back in the same circumstances, you're back in the same circle, not doing a dang thing, and you do that for a cycle of 6 months, and you find yourself in the exact same circumstances and situation. I want the opposite of that, all right? So I was asked several questions. I've talked about several things, but I will say this. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. You could be literally doing anything in the world on this Sunday morning. You decided to hang out with me. If it's not Sunday morning in your time zone, it's probably still Sunday nonetheless. So thanks for hanging out. Hopefully, I do take that very seriously, and hopefully I'll make it worth your time. And like the usual joke that I always say, if it's not worth your time, I'm sure Twitter will let me know, right? So definitely let me know. So the way this works out is the floor is pretty much open to anybody if they want to come up, but I try very hard to give this warning every single time. I don't mind anyone sharing advice or comments about certain things that they're going through because of the nature of the audience that is here. If that advice errs on a side where it could be clouded or perhaps even on the area of bad advice, I may add some clarification. It's not me being combative or me trying to, I was going to use a different word, but I'm trying to find a nicer word. I guess for the lack of a better word, shit on you. That is not the case here. I'm not trying to put you down. But the idea is I'm just very protective of the kind of audience that's coming in here. And especially because I know that for a lot of them, they don't necessarily have the information or knowledge as of yet to distinguish between good advice and bad advice as of yet. So I feel all of us should have a little bit of that and share a little bit of that responsibility to make sure we're protecting the people that are coming up behind us, right? I did bring up Shane. Shane requested. Shane is somebody that I definitely know, I respect, and I genuinely appreciate their perspective on things. Shane, if you want to introduce yourself real fast before I get started, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, I'm Shane. I'm a TypeScript, JavaScript web developer. I currently work at Lemongrass. We have a SAP solution for the cloud. So I'm in TypeScript and JavaScript, writing primarily React pretty much every day of the week.
Love it. So, a couple things. The other day, I had tweeted out, and I think this is really relevant for a lot of folks. The other day, I tweeted out, and I genuinely believe this. And I know every time I tweet this out, I always get some kind of anger or angry comments. But the idea that I tweeted out is, it is extremely important for you as a developer or someone trying to break in the industry, especially, that you learn what the demand for your area is, right? Every single market is completely different. Especially when we talk about tech, there's some areas where I've seen mobile development is king, right? Like they've got jobs after jobs. But to be honest, I feel like mobile development is almost secluded, especially in America, to certain cities, right? Certain areas. Because outside of that, you don't really find a ton of mobile jobs at all. Like, prime example, I lived in Memphis, Tennessee. I now live in Dallas, Texas. Memphis, there's almost no mobile jobs. Like, if you knew Android or Kotlin, or if you knew iOS and Swift, you were pretty much not going to have an opportunity. Maybe if you freelance in other cities, if you got that lucky, but to be honest, you weren't really getting much, right? It was very, very hard. But in Dallas, you find Android jobs everywhere. You find mobile jobs everywhere. Mobile development is king over here. You're not finding a ton of like Flutter and stuff like that. It's mainly native development, if I'm being honest. But that's huge here, right? Like there's tons of opportunities in it. So as a mobile dev, it probably wouldn't do you justice to be in Memphis, but it would be fantastic for you to be in Dallas, right? Knowing the demands of your market is extremely important because especially as a junior dev, and this is something I was trying to explain to somebody the other day as well, especially as a junior dev, when a company's considering hiring you for a developer position and it's your first position ever, one of the biggest concerns majority of companies have is one big thing. How long is it going to take for your onboarding process? For someone that will take a shorter period of time versus another, the incentive is a little bit higher to hire that candidate as opposed to someone who's probably doesn't know the tech stack, probably is going to require a lot more hand holding. Maybe they're not going to take 3 months or 6 months to get onboarded. Maybe it's going to take a year. And you have to understand, even though you're going to be in that company and on that team, it costs the company money to train you up, right? So they weigh that. How long is the onboarding process going to be? How much money are we theoretically going to lose before they start adding value to the code base? This all comes into the conversation, the equation. A lot of people don't think about that, but that's the reality of this. So when you know the tech stack, or at least a big portion of the tech stack that the company wants to utilize, you end up reducing the onboarding time. You end up making it an easier decision for that company to say, well, we were hiring a Java Angular developer. This person knows Java and Angular. So they're probably going to take a lot less time to onboard as opposed to this person who knows the MERN stack, JavaScript from front to back. Now they're going to have to take time to learn Java. They're going to have take time to learn Spring Framework. There's a lot that's required in this. Their onboarding time is going to be significantly higher. So if they have one candidate that knows the actual stack that they're utilizing, and then they have another one that knows MERN that needs to now learn what they need them to know, it's going to be very difficult to go with the second option as opposed to the first. It's too difficult of an ask or a situation, right? Or a hiring situation. That is why I often say, if you learn the demands of the market around you, you're never going to find yourself without an opportunity. It's extremely important. And so the other day, I had tweeted that out. Someone got upset about that. And what's funny is a buddy of mine, who I think is phenomenal, I think everybody should be following him as well, Adam Rakis, he retweeted something that I saw, and I'm like, this is what I'm talking about here. And I'm going to read this to you. The post in question said, I've worked professionally. They've worked professionally in Flutter for 3 years now. I'm a fan of Flutter. I've led Flutter workshops in the past. I've done all kinds of stuff in that market, right? I'm now in the market for a job, and oh no, I'm sorry, I skipped the line. The company I worked for recently laid me off because difficult securing the next round of investment. I'm now in the market for a job, and the majority of my recent experience is in Flutter. In my country of Canada, where they're located, there's 0 opportunities. One hiring manager I talked to said it's extremely hard to find Flutter developers. I'm also observing it is nearly impossible to find the Flutter positions. So it's almost like no one at all is using Flutter here. It makes no sense. I have a feeling that by the end of 2024, Flutter might be a complete afterthought. Is anyone else seeing different trends with Flutter? Now, here's the thing. When you look at certain markets, Flutter is extremely popular, right? Especially when we look at some international markets. Flutter is very valuable. But in your market, it may not be, right? And the comment from Adam Rakis that kind of really spoke to me is, it's so brutal. Do you need now to understand why I said it's safer for beginners to stick with industry standard tools like React instead of the fun tools like Svelte? These are people's livelihoods, not some stupid game. And that spoke to me because especially when we look at like Twitter as a whole, it's an echo chamber. I've told you this a million times. You have people that kind of re-emphasize certain viewpoints because it matches theirs, right? They love to just kind of harp on some talking points, especially when it's like the buzzword of the week, right? Like, and I've seen this trend on Twitter, God knows how many times at this point, where for 6 months something does well, then they end it and they go to something else, and for 6 months you have all these beginners not knowing what they need to be doing. Svelte was popular, and then Astro and all these other cool tools. Astro's cool, Svelte is cool. They're great. Don't get me wrong, but these aren't necessarily the tools that I would ever like basically push on towards a beginner, because I'm saying then, hey, you may not get an opportunity with this. Have you looked into what the market is? Of all the one-on-ones I've been doing so many one-on-ones lately. I think I've done over 40 plus right now. And I get in these conversations. What's funny is for these one-on-ones, I really thought they were going to be overpowered, or like predominantly like being revolving around like beginners in tech. To be honest, I've probably done maybe 9 beginners in tech calls. The rest have all been mid-level and up. I mean, all the way up to CTOs of companies, which I even told them at the beginning of the call, like, y'all know I'm not a CTO, right? Like, I don't have the qualifications on to tell you where to direct your company and things like that. I'm just a developer that runs their mouth on social media. I don't have that level. And they're like, no, no, we're coming to you for something different. We have great conversations, talks. But almost overwhelmingly, when it comes to the beginners, they almost have all the exact same situation. They all know the MERN stack, which is fine, right? I don't have hate against the MERN stack. But if that is the only thing you know, and when you look at the local market around you, and when you're looking at that market and they don't have MERN positions, it's something to really think about and consider as, should I be utilizing this, or should I be making this my own thing? And what's funny is I was on a call with somebody and they were out of New York, and they are a graphic designer, right? Amazing graphic designing skills. And what's funny is like they made this really cool header and they made all these really cool designs. They have like artwork that's been in like newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post. I was like, that's amazing, right? They have all this great artwork. And when they're trying to knock out things for landing their first developer position, because that's what they want to do, they skip through so many things that are important for the overall hiring process, right? I made a list the other day and I tweeted it out. Check out my profile. I literally listed out like the 7 steps to landing your first job in tech with explanations, like detailed explanations, right? And it's a very long thread. Don't get me wrong. It's long. I know for a fact, but I think it's extremely valuable because it's essentially like a big part of what a lot of these one-on-one calls are. So I was like, oh, it'd be great if I can kind of break it down for you so you don't necessarily have to book a one-on-one with me, but still get the same value. So many beginners look at these items as like a checklist and they immediately like tick off each item, and they just completely skip everything else. Like they're just like, oh, I need a portfolio set. Let me throw together the cheapest, easiest thing to do. Oh, I need a resume. Let me make this the most simplest, basic thing in the world. Oh, I need a LinkedIn. Let me barely answer the questions that it's asking me just so I can have the profile up. Like the first line of hiring are these recruiters and hiring manager. I mean, recruiters and people in HR. It's not necessarily the technical manager. You need to consider the audience that's landing on there. And so they don't necessarily know the difference between Java and C sharp or MERN stack and mean stack, right? They just have a job description. So now if they're saying I need a Java Angular developer and this person only knows MERN stack, they're probably not a match. I need to skip them. You're not considering that person landing on your information and at what they're going to be doing with it, right? Because remember, they're the very first line of hiring. You need to consider this. I brought up multiple speakers. Let me kind of go through them. I also see Sean's request, so I'll bring Sean up as well. But remember, for all the speakers, I try to cap these off at like an hour. We may go over a little bit if we need to, but I don't want to go, 3, 4, 5 hours. So let's keep that in mind for everybody. So that way, when this is done, people can kind of hammer away at some stuff. I'll start with the order that I see it on my screen. I don't know if it's a different order for other folks, but this is the way I see it. YK, we'll start with you. You want to introduce yourself and maybe have a comment or something?
Sure. Thanks for having me up here, first of all, Danny. And hey, everyone, my name is YK. I've been a software developer. I've done some product work, and now I'm a senior developer advocate at Propel. The reason I wanted to come up here, I was just going to listen. But the reason is because, what you said about, what was it? Something about Flutter and not learning something that's in demand in the market, that resonated with me a lot because, you're right. You see all these roadmaps, and I want to be like careful about not criticizing anyone in a negative way, but I don't want someone to be misled either. by one of these roadmaps. These roadmaps might work for some people, but it might not work for some other people, depending on their particular situation. So I think it's really important to, it's good to learn from these roadmaps, but at the same time, take it with a grain of salt and, find out exactly what works for you.
Oh, for sure. Like I've talked about this a couple times. I know exactly what I could tweet as a roadmap, and it's gonna get 10,000 likes with me barely trying. Right? Like, it's very obvious, and to a certain degree, I think the reason why it does so well, especially on Twitter, is many beginners really just don't know which path to be going down, and so they just harp on anything that kind of explains or dictates a path that they could potentially go down. But the reality is, especially on Twitter, some people are telling you exactly what you want to hear as opposed to what you need to hear. And they have no problem doing that in exchange for a red heart, right? They have no problem doing that. And the reality is, it may not necessarily be the right advice for you. And I tell people this all the time. Like, I constantly get asked, Danny, what do I need to learn now that can guarantee me a job? I even told Lawrence, by the way, my brother down there in the audience, I told him about this the other day. Like, someone literally asked me, what do I need to learn that guarantees me a job? And he's like, man, it's crazy that someone's saying the word guarantee in there. And I agree. But the reality is, it's wild, absolutely wild, to ask someone in Dallas, Texas, formerly Memphis, Tennessee, what you need in your market. Whether I don't know what the New York market is. I don't have a clue what the Tampa market is. I don't know what the California market looks like. I don't know what the Nigerian market looks like. I don't know what, so I always tell people, research your market. Why are you asking me? Because I can tell you what I think, but it may not be accurate. But if you start researching your local area, you'll know exactly what you need to learn, right? How often is that question asked? Especially, and I know if I'm getting that question, I'm not the only one that's getting that question, right? We constantly have people asking that question. And the reality is, and we were asked this question, so I'll answer this as well, included with this. You mentioned the local market here. How do we research that? For me, this is the path that I always explain. The first thing you should be doing immediately is getting on Indeed, LinkedIn, etc., and searching the job postings, right? But also, this is gonna take you several days. Figure out which ones have been there the longest, which ones come, which ones go, which ones stay there forever, right? Because there's some job postings that just stay there perpetually, and some of them are from like companies that pay for it to be there all the time, but maybe they're trying to like recruit for a boot camp in a sneaky way or whatever it may be, stuff like that, right? The other thing is, you also want to kind of be aware, and for me, at least this is what I do when I'm researching and seeing these postings. I also kind of want to know which companies take 10,000 years for their interview process, right? It lets you kind of know how long their interview process may be if it takes them that long to finally place a candidate, right? And take down the listing. It's something that I pay attention to. But I want to see what are at least the core languages that they're looking for. Everyone has like some funky little framework or something like that they may be utilizing. That's fine. I'm not too worried about that part. But I am at least looking like, is Python being the most in-demand thing here? Is JavaScript being the most in-demand thing here? Is Java being overwhelmingly asked for? Things like that, right? But also, I enter in all the technologies in the search bar just to compare the number of jobs. But now I also do this over a length of period of time, because maybe 1 week in particular, Java's more in demand, whereas maybe C# just had a slow week for hiring, and now they're starting to post the listings, right? The other thing, I'm going to meetups. I also want to see, are there meetups that are completely dedicated to that one language? Because if you find like a lot of Java groups, for example, that's a pretty good sign that there may be a big demand for Java in that city, and there's a ton of Java developers. But if you don't find any for like .NET or PHP, it could probably be a good sign that no one's really using it in the market, right? But I go to those meetups and I ask the devs themselves, hey, what are you seeing? What are you using? If you were to go on the market today, what would you be trying to lead with, all right? The other thing is conversations with recruiters, hiring managers, whatever it may be. Just tell them, look, I don't have a position, I'm not at the skill level yet where I think you could hire me, but I really am trying to get the insight from you. What do you find being the tech stacks that are the most in demand? Now, when you separate that, how are you finding that between seniors and juniors, right? Take what they say with a grain of salt, but look for the theme, right? Are they constantly saying Java? And what's funny is, Memphis, Tennessee, for example, .NET is king, right? Most of the jobs exist around C#.NET. There are definitely some orgs that use Java though, right? Which is great. When I came to Dallas, I was talking to recruiters in the beginning, and one of the first things I said to them, because again, I had no network in Dallas, right? So I said to them in the beginning, "Oh, you probably have like a lot of .NET need, right?" Because I was thinking it's the Mid South, all the areas are kind of near each other. It makes sense. And they're like, "No, actually, it's we have a huge need for Java. Like everything here is Java." I was like, "Whoa, really? That's interesting. I didn't think that." Every single recruiter said the same thing. I start looking at the research. I start talking to devs. They support exactly the same concept. Java is everywhere here. Java is king here. Java has all the opportunities here. I was like, dang, that's exactly what we need to kind of focus on, right? Then I see all these junior devs in the area, and they're struggling to get opportunities, and they're all going the MERN stack route. And I'm like, who's guiding you towards this MERN stack? It's a great place to start. But if Java's not on your radar, and you're in this market of Dallas, Java needs to be on that radar. All the jobs here are revolving around Java. When I say that to beginners, it's like their mind went blank. Like I had no clue. It wasn't even, I didn't know I needed to know that. All the big companies out here are using it. Even all the small companies out here are using it. So it's something to keep in mind. Knowing that demand changes things. So I like to look at the job listings. I like to get in the conversations, especially with recruiters and hiring managers, since they're obviously seeing more job postings on a regular basis than pretty much anybody else. I also like to talk to other devs. I try to, again, leveraging LinkedIn. It doesn't necessarily matter, by the way, if you have a big following or not. If you ask a very intentful question with strong intention and you're not wasting anybody's time, majority of the time, as long as it's not like an influencer that gets like 500 messages a day or whatever, you often find yourself getting responses to that. It may not necessarily lead into the networking relationship that you want, but you at least get the really important information that you were seeking and looking for. So I hope that answered that question there and kind of supported the point YK was making as well, because I agree. Especially on Twitter, people will kind of give you any kind of roadmap to kind of go off of. I'll go to Caleb, and then from Caleb, I'll go to Sean, and then Sarthik. Caleb, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Danny. What's up, everybody? I'm Caleb. I'm a software engineer at Netflix. Sorry about my voice. I was at a wedding last night, so lots of singing. Danny, actually, I was just going to ask you a follow-up question for people. When you talk about like React versus Angular and different tech stacks, and like roadmaps, what do you tell people that are learning web dev around like using a library or framework versus like learning the fundamentals of JavaScript first?
I think when it comes to anything, and you know what's funny is like, especially on Twitter, that's like a really big topic, right? Like, in the beginning, I used to always say, hey, you should learn JavaScript before going to a framework or a library. I genuinely believe that. And I can't begin to tell you the number of people I've talked to after that have said, I actually started with React first, and React taught me JavaScript because I couldn't understand JavaScript. Or I started with Vue, and Vue explained everything to me. And from there, I was able to go to basic JavaScript. It may be backwards to some, but it worked for them. So if it works for them, who am I to say don't do this, right? I think whatever works for you should be the path that you focus on. Now, I will say, when it comes to certain things, and especially like one area in particular, CSS, I genuinely believe the frameworks make your life so easy to the point that you actually forget regular CSS, or you don't even know what's happening. So especially with CSS, I don't care if anyone argues with me on this one, that's fine. You need to know CSS before you go to Bootstrap. You need to know CSS before you go to Tailwind or anything else, or Chakra UI or whatever. Like, you need to know how Flexbox is working. You need to understand all that, because, and especially when it comes to CSS specifically, there are some companies that don't utilize frameworks at all. Prime example, I work at AutoZone. We don't use any Bootstrap. We don't use Tailwind. Everything is vanilla CSS and custom CSS. We created our own style library. We have all that. None of that is stuff that comes right outside of the box. So you need to know CSS. And if you just jump immediately into a Bootstrap kind of situation, and you know the absolute basics of CSS, you're really putting yourself in a situation where you're like almost harming yourself, because I can't even begin to tell you how many people don't understand how to utilize Flexbox because they're so used to doing like col dash small dash for. Like, you need to give yourself some like strong basics there. But when it comes to JavaScript, I still think, for me at least, knowing JavaScript is what helped me in a big way understand Angular, because I went to Angular first before React. I don't know if I could have learned Angular without knowing JavaScript first. That's just me. But you know, everyone's different, right? So especially on Twitter, I say try out, see what works. But I will say, especially when it comes to certain things like DOM manipulation or even state. I don't know how I would have understood state without knowing the basics of JavaScript, because there was just so much going on in my brain when that came around. Like I couldn't comprehend it. So different strokes for different folks. But then again, like I don't know how you could go to like Spring Framework without knowing Java. Like it just seems like a hard thing to do in that situation. But again, everyone's different. Find out what works for you, I suppose, in that regard. And hopefully we'll go from there. I'll go to Shane first, then Sean. Shane, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of weigh in on the framework, learning a framework before learning kind of the basics. And, it stems back nicely to that tweet from Adam. Someone went really all in on learning Flutter and they didn't learn the underlying technology. And then when the Flutter jobs dried up, they kind of felt like they were hung out to dry. And that's a really good point. And if they had learned the underlying technology, they would have been able to pivot that to the next framework, right? So if you understand JavaScript, it makes it a lot easier to pick up Vue or Svelte or any of the other web dev frameworks if you understand JavaScript. But if you go all in on React, frameworks, I've said this 100 times, frameworks come and go. 10 years ago, it was a completely different landscape with a baby React and all these different frameworks. So 10 years ago, if you knew Backbone or whatever was it, the hot thing then, if that was the only thing you knew how to build a website with, you really would have been, shit out of luck. So I've said it a bunch, but learn how to write and read code. Don't learn a stack, right? Most of these programming languages do the same things. There's for loops, there's ifs, it's all the same stuff, just with that different syntax. So Python does it differently than C++ or JavaScript, so learn how to write and read code. Don't learn a stack.
Also, before we continue, I want to make a shout out. We have 200 people in this space. I think that's absolutely wild. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I know I didn't really give a lot of notice. Generally, I don't really give a lot of notice when I do these spaces. But I try to make sure that the value is completely there, so that way it's absolutely worth it for you. And I take that seriously. Like, I know you have a million things that you could be doing. You could be hanging out with the fam or watching TV. So the fact that you spend your time here, I consider that, and I definitely appreciate that a lot, and I try to make sure that the value is absolutely there. So we'll continue now. Also, one extra shout out for this. A big shout out to AppWrite. For those that don't know, or maybe you do because it's like literally on my profile, I'm a brand ambassador for AppWrite. Basically, what that means is I get to do more Udemy giveaways now because they cover all that for me. And my meetup now has pizza money. So for those that don't know, we do meetups, a big portion of meetups in the Dallas area. I want to put everybody on the radar for one meetup in particular. It's going to be September 12th, right? I haven't announced it yet, but now I will say it is definitely more local area focused, but it's an entire meetup revolving around the subject of how to get a job in tech. And I've invited multiple hiring managers across the city of Dallas to be there. And so obviously for people in the city of Dallas, it's going to be fantastic because there's going to be a lot of connections that they can make. They get a lot of information and direct access to a lot of these hiring managers, but it'll also be virtual. So that way you can kind of attend online. Obviously, like when it comes to the networking portion, you'll be able to network with people in the chat. And I mean, our chat is always on fire for the most part. So definitely keep that, keep your radar open for that one. And AppWrite gets to cover the pizza for that stuff and all that good stuff. But one other thing I want to say is I'm going to be doing a Udemy giveaway near the end of this space, right? I'm going to start it at the end of this space. So pretty much everyone in this call, if you're trying to get, some Udemy courses, that could probably help you out. AppWrite's covering all that for me. So big shout outs to AppWrite. I'm a big fan of them. If you haven't checked it out, their name is literally in the title of this. Amazing organization. Really amazing team as well. So big kudos to AppWrite for making that possible. All right, Sean, to you.
What's good, Danny? And thank y'all for coming and supporting. One thing that I just wanted to say real quick before I go back to work. I love this story because this is specifically why I don't target, I don't call it newbie or junior, because that person is years into their career doing something that some people would consider newbie. And I'm telling you that some people learned how to run before they learned how to walk. And just because they're running and now learning to walk, people are looking down on them, calling, oh, June, oh. I'm just going to say that, y'all, other people have different perspectives. The advice that worked for you might not work for them simply because of where they are, where they were born, like what have you, reasons that have nothing to do with the things that y'all are talking about. So that's kind of why I hate when people try to put like knowledge in, oh, this is newbie, this is junior. And then the 5-year dev needed to hear that. Like that 3-year dev now looking for jobs needed to hear 3 years ago, 3 years ago that they needed to know what's in the market. And they might never get that information if it's just labeled as something that they don't see themselves as. So I'm just going to put that there. That's why I try not to put knowledge under, oh, a certain category. You need to be this in order for this. No. Learn the steps that you need to do. Whether you're learning to walk or run, please do what you got to do. Take those steps. But to that person, I hope that they're taking those steps. And if you're in that same situation in the audience, please, y'all, do the things Danny just said. Check out LinkedIn. Check out Indeed. Literally take the steps today so that you won't have to be in the same situation tomorrow. I'm going to keep going to the work. Thank y'all for being here. Hopefully you're going to also take the steps. I'll add if I see any other spaces to add. Thank you for hosting this, Danny. And then shout out to AppRight for making it happen as well. Shout out to you, Danny. Over to you.
Yeah. Hey, big shout outs to AppRight, everyone. And by the way, I just want to correct one thing. AppRight isn't doing the Twitter space. I don't work for AppRight. I'm just a brand ambassador. I love the product. I love them. So just making that distinction because I saw some tweets ago like AppRight's doing this. Don't get me in trouble, y'all. All right. So I just want to make that clearness there. But regardless, I do agree because I used to have this belief and obviously it was wrong. And the last month or so has kind of cleared that one item up for me, right? I used to genuinely believe that after you're in the industry, it's a lot easier for you to a certain degree to distinguish certain pieces of information being good advice, bad advice, good tech stacks that you can utilize in your local market, maybe ones that aren't so in demand. You would think that at least you would assume people would have that access to that information. If anything that these one-on-one calls have taught me over the last month is regardless of your skill level or regardless of your career level, you could be in a situation that may not necessarily be the best. Prime example of this, I jumped on a call. They booked a call with me. This person was a team lead, right? They'd been at this company for 6 years, right? Awesome human being. I really love the conversation that we had. To be honest, I'll even admit I have a bad habit of sometimes enjoying the conversations to where I don't stick to the time frame that they booked. So like I do a lot of 10-minute calls, but if I really enjoy that call or I feel like there's a lot of value or maybe I feel like this person's truly lost to the point where I need to extend that time, I do. That's a me problem. I get it. I shouldn't necessarily be doing that. But regardless, I do. And the conversation with this person was they were a team lead. I was really shocked when I saw the booking with their information because like, man, why is a tech lead, team lead coming up on the call with me, right? And I remember jumping on the call and they said, you know, Danny, they live in New Jersey, but they worked in New York. And they said, I started at this company as an intern and I'd worked here for 6.5 years. They go through this whole story of how they rose up the ranks and how they recently got laid off and things like that. And to be honest, it was just a toxic work environment that they were kind of afraid to leave because they didn't necessarily feel like they could pass an interview, which they were right because they've been interviewing nonstop since February and they've just been bombing interview after interview constantly. And we had a long call and we kind of broke down the strategies they should be utilizing. One big thing in particular, and this is one thing that I even tweeted about the other day, a toxic environment can truly kind of to a strong degree destroy a lot of the belief that you have in yourself, but also in the place that you work in, right? And this place, not only was it toxic, he started there as an intern. He was a tech lead, team lead, right? His salary was $95,000 a year in New York. We had just helped junior devs in New York land jobs for $120,000. So compared to the area that he lived in, he wasn't even making anywhere close to the salary he should be making. He's a tech lead. you would be considering way higher up the pay scale than 95 grand or even 120 grand, like significantly higher, especially for a city like New York. In New York, as crazy as it is, 120, that's basically like, 40, 50 grand in other cities, right? It's like, even though it's a huge number, the cost of living is so significant there that it's hard to break even with that. But when you look at him, he was underpaid, undervalued. He was just kind of pushed on and stepped on the entire time, and it was crushing him. It was tough. And so I felt for him a lot. We got him a strategy. Just last week, I got an email from him saying he feels more confident in interviews, which is great, but he started following a lot of the kind of roadmap that we laid out. And one of the cool things about that is honestly just saying, hey, now you feel, and that's the craziest thing about these one-on-ones, is I see people at the beginning of the call feeling like kind of lost and upset, and I instantly start seeing hope like get regained in their face, right? To me, that's infectious, that's addicting, and I've definitely become addicted to that because I love being able to do things on scale. But that's the other problem too, is like when I do a one-on-one and it's an hour-long call, I'm helping one individual specifically, versus right now I'm potentially having the opportunity to help 210 people at the exact same time. So it's really hard for me to like think about individual basis versus scalable basis. I'm constantly juggling this, but regardless, it's something that's constantly on my mind. And I love being able to see that people that genuinely thought they were lost and now finding like, okay, I know I need to do this. I have an actionable list of items now that I can knock out and make sure that, hey, if I do this, this, and this, and this, it's going to take me closer to the goal of what I wanted. Now, the reality is, and I wish I could say something different in this regard, right? I wish I could tell you that on the road to you actually getting what you want and succeeding and getting the job opportunities and this and that, I wish I could tell you the path is easy and smooth, but it ain't. It genuinely is not, right? I was talking about this literally the other day at a conversation with a boot camp. And when I was talking to them, I was saying, I remember like, I didn't grow up in the best of circumstances, just being real about it. I don't really talk about it a lot, but it really wasn't. And I remember like going through all this pressure and all these like, man, mental struggles and all that in my teens. And once I got through it, I was like, whew, cool. Then my 20s hit and it was a brand new set of struggles, because now it's not even just life struggles, it's economical struggles. It's not having money for bills. It's going through all these challenges, like trying to figure out life at the same time, being completely torn between what side of the world I even want to be with, right? Do I want to stay on the straight and narrow? Do I want to go to the path that looks a lot more attractive, but it may not necessarily be the most legal thing in the world to do, but I know I could get money to provide, but you keep going back and forth. It's a brand new set of challenges at your 20. And I finally made it through that. I finally hit 30 and I'm like, whew, I survived my 20s. I saw 30. There was a time where I didn't even think I'd see the number 3 in my age, but I hit 30. I made it through the pressure. I made it through the challenges. I feel good. And then life whispered in my ear, all right, now I'm about to add this heat. You're never going to have it all figured out. You genuinely won't, right? There's no roadmap that says this is going to be your entire life. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I truly struggled with everything, right? Like there was times where I didn't know where the money was going to come from. Genuinely speaking, the day my kid was born, at that time in my life, I was working 102 hours a week. I remember after he was born, 90 minutes later, I was at work frying chicken because I literally had no other choice. I'm so glad to be able to look back on that time instead of still being in that time, right? For a lot of people, they don't have the same situation. And so the reality is you need to kind of find out what's going to be the thing that pivots you to where you need to be. It's not going to be smooth. It's not going to be easy. And I know, especially on a place like Twitter, if you tell anybody like, hey, they're going to work hard, people get mad about that. But the reality is to change your life and your circumstances, work is required. I know we can all give advice on what we would wish the world was, but it isn't in that situation now. And so, prime example, this was last year, somebody in my Discord, shout out to the Commit Your Code Discord. If you need a community support you, check them out. The link is in my bio, amazing group. But we had somebody in my Discord literally crying that they bombed an interview, right? And I said, you know what? Let's jump in a voice call. Let's talk about this, right? They jumped in the Discord voice channel. We're talking. And they basically said, yeah, they brought up a coding interview. They weren't prepared. And so they bombed it. And so I said, well, why didn't you kind of prepare for it? What was wrong? They said, oh, somebody on Twitter told them that you shouldn't have to learn data structures and algorithms to land a job. So they didn't, and they brought out a coding test, and it was for a company that they really liked. They failed it. Now the reality is, I'm not a fan of DSA, right? I don't think anybody's like, oh, DSA, I can't wait to jump out of bed and start solving these questions. That's not the case here, right? It's a unfortunately for some companies, it's a metric that they utilize, and it's something that they look at during the hiring process. You need to know it, right? Now, I know that there are some companies that don't utilize DSA. I've only actually ever had one interview in my life that didn't revolve around DSA. It's actually my current company now. It was a live coding challenge instead. But for every other job opportunity, even for jobs I didn't get, it all revolved around whiteboard level kind of coding, right? Now, I've talked to other people where they're like, I've only had to give a handful of DSA interviews. Everything else after that was interviews that didn't revolve around it. It's different for everybody. But to willingly cut off a portion of the market simply because you don't want to learn it, especially when you're in a situation where, as a junior, it's already hard to get the interview, right? You need to now think, do I want to squander every single opportunity that comes up from that portion of the market? Or do you want to prepare for it and be like, yeah, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but at least I have the skills to pass these interviews, whether I utilize it in the day job or not. That's up to you. It's your determination to make. But I do think it's foolish to, especially in the beginning, to seclude yourself from any part of the industry or any part of the job market. That's just my belief on that. Let me go to Sarthak for a second, then I'll go to Heather. Sarthak, go ahead.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks for this amazing space and sorry, my throat. So yeah, so we talked about a lot of things, but I'm going to talk about what you learn first, like framework or language. So I'm going to share my personal experience. And before that, I just wanted to introduce people like, my name is Sarthak, as you know, on my title. I'm basically a YouTuber, but now I work for Pfizer, so both things are there. I create videos about a lot of amazing frameworks and every programming thing, so you can just check out from my profile. Anyways, so I'm going to share my personal story of like which I learned. So basically, I start with the PHP, but as soon as I know that how to submit a form with the PHP, I realized that there are frameworks that can solve many problems, which I didn't know what are the problems, but I know that there are some problems and there will be something, and frameworks can solve that. So I jumped from CodingNitor, then jumped to Laravel, and without knowing much about the PHP, I can create great websites with Laravel. So that's how I started, and same with the JavaScript. Before learning into the JavaScript get element by ID, I didn't know that, but I know that with the Vue.js we can do some things. And then first I learned Vue.js, then I learned JavaScript, and then I jumped to React and other frameworks like Angular as well, like etc. So in my opinion, whatever works for you is the best thing to get started, and whatever comes in your mind first is the best thing. So even if frameworks you feel like are good, you that gets into your mind first rather than the language, go with that. But if you think that, okay, I don't like framework, they are heavy, they need setup, I don't like the file structures, what are they? I just know that there is a single file with the language and I can start with that, so go with that. But with this, I can tell you one very important thing, and we had initially discussed about like which language or which path you need to go as a junior developer or as a programmer, basically. So I would say like just start looking into what is in demand, and you need to be extremely good at that thing, even if it is very small, but it's having demand. So we talked about Flutter, we talked about other than React frameworks, so frameworks like Svelte and other things. So even with the Flutter, it's not huge demand, but there is demand. So if you are extremely good at Flutter, you will going to get job definitely, because people will going to find you. You don't have to find the job. If you are good, if you are showcasing your work, if you are telling that, hey, I know that thing which nobody know in the world, then people will going to find you and give you and offer you a job. And that happened to me. I had no idea what job is. I have never worked on any job. then I was just doing my YouTube, and someday, out of the blue, I just got an email. Hey, we are building a amazing Laravel developer teams, and we want a full stack developer who can work on front end and also have knowledge of AWS, a lot of things. Are you willing to work with me? I said no, because I don't want to do any job. But after some time, I said, okay, let's see what they are offering. I don't know. But then I when I like scheduled the meeting, and they explained me what will be my role and what will be the team. I was so excited to learn more things which I cannot learn from the YouTube or from online, which is like team, how to work with team. I learned that, and they offered me. I have never worked, I have never submitted any resume to anyone. I have never asked anyone to give me job. That job came to me because I was constantly, for last 6 years, I was just working on my YouTube channel, constantly pushing videos, like from 10 minutes to 10 hours of videos I have on my channel. And that that shows what I can do. And if people are looking around for something special, and if they find me, they can just get to me. So that's from my side. And thank you once again, Danny, for giving me the opportunity. And for your Udemy giveaways, consider me once again, if you like, and I'll love to be the part of it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about that. We have a couple comments like I want to address. Right, number one, someone basically said, Danny, you kind of said earlier that somebody could learn React, for example, before JavaScript. Obviously, this is something that's commonly spoke about on Twitter, but I said that I specifically say that you must learn CSS before jumping to something like Bootstrap. There's a very important distinction here. When you're using React, you're still using JavaScript principles to build your components and your pages out, right? Like you're still using JavaScript pieces in there. When it comes to Bootstrap, for example, you're not using CSS concepts. You're entering classes like call, small, for, and it's doing all the CSS magic behind the scenes. So you don't actually know what's happening. You understand that, hey, it's creating me columns, it's separating things, it's using the principle of flexbox or grid, but you don't necessarily understand how it's doing that or what element that's CSS related is being utilized there. It's all just being done in a class. That's the big distinction. So even though you're using React before JavaScript, JavaScript principles and code is being used there, so you're gaining those concepts. But when it comes to CSS or Bootstrap and Tailwind, you're using the class, and so you don't actually understand how Flexbox is working. You don't understand how the columns are being created. You don't understand how to control the grid. That is the big difference here, why I'm explaining it that way. Now, again, I personally believe for me, I need to learn JavaScript before I go to React or Angular or anything else. I need to learn CSS before going to a framework. I need to know Java before going to Spring Framework. Like, I need to know those things. That's me. On Twitter, I always had that belief until I spoke to so many people that literally said, hey, I learned React first, then I went to JavaScript and it helped me out. I learned Vue first and I went to JavaScript, it helped me out. Everyone's different, so you need to find that regard, but I don't see how you can use Bootstrap first and then understand CSS because you're not writing any CSS in that situation. When it comes to Bootstrap, no CSS is being written there to kind of teach you these concepts so you can at least grab hold of it. Maybe you'll understand, hey, this created a grid, this created a flexbox. But even when you talk to some people that utilize Bootstrap all the time, they don't necessarily know how it's creating these components. They just know, hey, when I put this button thing here, it creates this button. And the reality too is Bootstrap is great at making everything look like it's made by Bootstrap. You're not customizing any of it. You're not changing it. You're not altering it from its belief. Tailwind is different in that regard because you're still altering things, customizing it to what you need. But Bootstrap is just keeping it exactly the way Bootstrap wants. You don't know how it's doing any of that stuff. There's a whole bunch of quote unquote magic behind the scenes that you're not familiar with. So that's why I'm saying it that way. If that's difficult for you to understand, I get it. But it's not backwards at all. I think it makes perfect sense in that regard because React, you're writing JavaScript. With Bootstrap, you're not writing CSS. I'll go to Heather next, then I'll go to Kyle. Heather, go ahead.
Hey everyone, thanks for hosting this space, Danny, and great to hear from everyone on stage. Just a little bit about me. I've been an engineer for 5 years and recently pivoted to startup space and also to DevRel, and currently looking for a job. And I'm finding the market is super hard to get past some of these early stage interviews. And maybe that's just me, but I'm really finding, and it's like I find that it's so important to stay sharp on your skills, and maybe it's more your style to learn non-linearly and learn React, learn a little bit of these other frameworks, but it's so important to know those fundamentals. And I find that I'm both returning to my fundamentals as I apply for software engineer roles, and also pushing myself to learn new skills like video editing in order to have more of a portfolio for DevRel. So it's, even though there's like a lot of really great advice out there, like I don't need to reiterate what everyone is saying about like know your market, know what people are hiring for, but it's like it's super important to, it's no but, it's like that, and it's super important to stay on top of your stuff, because I think I've kind of I looking back at my journey, like there are times when I was coasting for a few different reasons, like it wasn't my main priority to focus on my career, and all these other things were going on in my life. And so that's okay to find something comfortable and stay there for a while. But then looking back, I wish I had worked harder. I forgive myself for coasting, but at the same time, I wish I had worked harder. And I also wish I spent less time in my first full-time engineering role, because it was a toxic environment. And I'm still having to undo some of those terrible aspects of culture and just straight up harassment that I had to endure, because it will, affect you in the long run. So being super like conscious and doing that deep work of knowing what skills you want to develop and enhance, and also knowing that you have your fundamentals clear and straight. Like it was hard for me to approach data structures and algorithms maybe as a junior, or maybe within my first few years, but now as I have a few years of software engineering, it's enjoyable for me to look at algorithms, because I have a lot of context there. I've written code, and this helps me to explain some of these functions that are out of the box, easy to use. These high level languages will give you these things, and to hear like the Primogen talk about algorithms on the front end master's course, he just explains them and breaks it down in a way that's like, oh my God, I'm having all these realizations about these things that I've used day in and day out, but I just, now is the time for me to understand really the inner workings of these fundamentals. And that's okay. Like it's okay to return to something that maybe you didn't get at first. And it's important to, maybe learn things in parallel, try things out, and put things down, and then pick them up at a time that might be more appropriate to learn and deep dive. So it's hard. It's hard to land your first job. It's hard to learn to land your sixth job. It's just not an easy thing to do, and it's really emotionally a huge roller coaster, because you get a bunch of rejections one day, and then another day you get invited to the second round out of 7, and it makes your whole day. So it's really important to be your best advocate.
So, a couple things. Absolutely agree. The job market now is more competitive than ever. But to be honest, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, right? I feel like when beginners hear that, they're like, oh, there's no jobs. There's jobs, right? We're just saying it's not as easy as just saying you're interested in tech and someone's going to hire you. You need to give them reasons to say yes. You need to de-risk yourself as a candidate. And for a lot of beginners, they're not even doing that. And so when they get discouraged, I kind of feel bad, but it's like, again, going back to like the one-on-ones I've been doing, I jumped on a one with someone to where they're saying, I've been searching for a job for 2.5 years. I was like, 2.5 years? It's a lot of time. Let's jump on this call. Let's figure this out. And so they booked the call. We jump on the call. I'm like, all right, cool. Show me the resume. Show me the LinkedIn. Show me the portfolio site. Show me the GitHub. Like, let's go through this, right? You go to the portfolio site. You go to the resume. What is the project that they're listing on there? A weather app. A weather app. You've been learning to code for 2.5 years. For majority of us, we look at a weather app as this is one of the first projects that you build when you learn JavaScript. This is like one of the first YouTube tutorials that you're going to fall upon. How are you using this to say, I'm ready for a job? How are you using this to show to an employer, hey, this is me bringing the best set of my skills? That's a beginner tutorial, right? I'm not putting anybody down here. It's amazing that you build this up, and you build it, and you learn how to use APIs, and you learn how to, get an API key and make API requests. That's great. But that's exactly what you did. I personally believe that there are 2 levels of projects. One area of project is you build this to learn something from it. The other area is you're building these projects to showcase to employers, hiring managers, recruiters, other developers, right? One builds up your skill set. The other showcases that skill set. These projects are not the same thing. And the problem with a lot of beginners is they say, oh, if I build a project, it has to be of the quality to showcase to other employers. But you haven't even built projects to learn from. You haven't built up your skill set. You haven't built up the concepts. How are you going to just completely jump to one area without knowing anything from the other? They both go hand in hand. This is why I've often told people, I don't care about the quantity of the projects that you have on your portfolio site, that you showcase, that you talk about, that you list. It could be one or two, but these are going to be significantly massive sized projects. All the other projects that you build need to be projects that you build in large quantity as far as I'm concerned. But these are going to be the ones that apply the concepts that you're learning, that makes the concept solidified and you understand it, that you're not being handheld the entire time through it, but you actually understand how to utilize it. It's the same thing like going to class at school, right? Like you go to class and you're writing stuff down, but you're not writing everything down. You're like, this is my thesis. You're writing it down, you're learning the concept, and then you're creating your thesis and your final projects and all that other good stuff on the side. And it's completely separate from the first category, right? It's the same concept here. So I do agree, job market is definitely tough right now. But I will also say this with a caveat. Almost every single day, I'm getting folks that contact me, letting me know, like, hey, they're getting jobs. So especially if you're a beginner and you're freaking out, don't. Like, you need to be prepared. Right? We're not going to do this half-ass and half-ways. Like, we're going to actually apply what we need to apply. But also understand it's competitive. And you're not necessarily going to get picked up for the very first opportunity that you apply for. And, you know, it sucks to a certain degree. But at the same time, I think it's also telling of the times that just knowing the bare minimum isn't going to open doors the way that you think it is. And this is the one like mindset shift I've been trying for like at least the last 4 years now to like shift people towards. Learning how to code, you're not just memorizing syntax, y'all. Like you're not just there like regurgitating what a div is. Like you're a problem solver. This field is literally there for problem solvers, right? And you're using that code as a way to deliver that solution. The code isn't the solution itself, but is the delivery mechanism and method utilized to deliver your solution. You don't need like every single seasoning in the spice cabinet to make a dish great, right? You use a few of them, and you use it, very heavily and at a healthy amount. You got a great tasting dish, right? I don't think you need to learn every single popular tool that tech Twitter talks about. I think, especially when it comes to Twitter, even with this space, even tweets from me, I try really, really hard to make sure my anytime I share information, it's not bad information. But the reality is, even I get it wrong sometimes. So if I get it wrong, you got to know other people are getting it wrong. Allow the tweets, allow the posts, even allow this Twitter space to spark some ideas and apply it to research. See if it applies to you. Don't just blindly say, this influencer with 100,000 followers said AI is killing all tech jobs. I'm going to believe him. Look, that's not the case, man. Y'all got to chill. Like some of the conversations I get into just blows my mind, man. And so please don't freak out. Don't allow hype to be the deciding factor of what it is that you're doing. Allow the research to dictate it. Because the reality is a lot of the people that aren't qualified to make these statements are the loudest making them, and it's freaking folks out. So don't worry too much about it. One thing I want to say here, by the way, I have like 26 requests to speak, and I don't see a single one. So if you're getting mad saying like, Danny, why don't you accept my request? It's Twitter being Twitter. I'm just being real with you. I don't see a single one. So I apologize. But also, to be honest, we're already at the hour, and I'm going to push it a little bit more. So not really a ton of space extra for that anyway. But just being real about that. So if you feel like you're being slighted, it's definitely not the case. I've never done that. Now I see 14. I don't know. A lot of people just did theirs, but whatever may be, regardless. Anyway, so kind of want to progress ever so slightly. I feel like, number one, I feel like we've covered a lot in this space already, but hopefully you're getting kind of the value that you thought was necessary. Oh, Lawrence just dropped. I was about to go Lawrence. All right. We had a really important question come up. I thought this was a good one. This person, Utba, asked, I'm already past JavaScript and I'm learning React. However, after researching for quite some time, my area is more into Java and C#. How can somebody make a switch at this stage? One thing I kind of want to explain to folks, most tech stacks, especially when we're talking about in the area of web development, JavaScript is going to be on the front end. So you didn't waste or lose or like not gain any momentum there by not knowing JavaScript. It's going to help you. Knowing React is going to be valuable. Now learn something on the back end, and now you're a full stack dev. Simple as that, right? So if you find out that your area has more Java and C#, that's probably where I want to start putting a lot more of my focus and effort on for the back end side of things, right? Use the front end to serve the information, use the back end to create the calculations, and send it through an API. Boom, you're good, right? Like that's exactly what you need to be doing. So I don't think there's anything that you necessarily need to pivot on. I don't know your market, but more than likely it's going to use something revolving around the Spring framework. So I pick that up. I'd pick up Java, for example, and boom, you're good there. But the one thing I want you to also kind of look into is which job are you finding more quote unquote junior friendly? Like if you were to meet like a bunch of local devs, like use LinkedIn, search your area, find the devs that just got hired within like the last year. And ask them like, hey, were you hired with Java or was it C#? Did you find them being opposed to the fact that you only knew one versus the other, et cetera, et cetera? Like get that research in. And so you have a few of those conversations, and I think you'll be in good shape. So hopefully that makes sense. Is there any, Kyle, go ahead.
I just wanted to add in there, if you're talking about, jobs that are more junior, I wanted to share with folks, how I got into the tech world. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a staff software engineer at Circle CI, and I've been there 6 years. But my last employer was Geek Squad at Best Buy. So that may surprise some folks, but that's because my first job in tech was not a programming job. I was a programmer, don't get me wrong. I've been programming since I was like maybe 10 or 12 or something like that, but that's not the job I got hired for. I got hired as a support engineer. And by the way, I thought I knew things. I felt confident when I got that job. I was like, yeah, I know Git. That's the thing to like save different versions of my stuff, right? And like, I thought that I knew things, but then you get in the job and you realize, oh my goodness, there's so much to learn. But that's okay, because the difference is like right now you're trying to learn all of these things, and first of all, you're not getting paid for it, but you're juggling that with the rest of your life, right? Like you probably have a real job or some other responsibilities, and learning on the job is going to be a huge difference for you, because it means you can actually focus on the things you're supposed to be studying and learning while actually doing the rest of your life at the same time. So I joined as a support engineer. They did ask that I think one programming language, but it was pretty minimal, right? And I leveraged my experience. I don't think that this would always work, but I said, I worked at Geek Squad. We did lots of tickets and working with customers and solving problems, and I tried to, gauge my responses and style my resume towards this position. I'm good with support. I'm a programmer. Get me in. I ended up doing that for a year. At the end of that year, I went from there wasn't technically a junior role, but I went from junior to senior. And I think a year later, I was doing something like senior software related. I can't quite keep up with everything. And yeah, now I'm staff software engineer. So don't, tackle necessarily immediately the dream job you're going for. I always wanted to be a web developer. I didn't even know that other jobs existed, right? I didn't have any tech people in my life to tell me what type of roles there were or anything like that. So I just knew I wanted to be a web developer, whatever the hell that meant. So look around, see what jobs are open. Don't worry about starting lower than what you may want. Hey, listen, as long as you're making more money than you do today, make the step, start learning, and you'll climb the ladder. That's my advice.
Definitely agree. Couple things here. Number one, almost 250 people in here. Thank you so much for hanging out and all the good stuff. I know the number keeps changing here and there, but I really want to, kind of emphasize and support and kind of be appreciative of that, right? Like, second thing is, I don't often record these spaces, if I'm being real. I really don't. So if you think this is valuable, if you think this could be helpful, share it out. Maybe somebody can listen to this after the fact and kind of get the help and support that they need, because the reality is of why I do this. I know sometimes people get kind of feeling lost. They feel discouraged. and things like that. And so hopefully this can kind of help clear up some of that stuff. So if you think the space is valuable in any way, shape, or form, share it out right now. Also, if you've heard from the speakers and you appreciate anything that they say, check out the profile. If you're thinking to add some value to your day, hit that follow button, right? It may improve your timeline a little bit. A couple things that I do want to add here. Again, shout out to Appright. I'm about to do the Udemy giveaway that I was talking about, so I'm going to have that there. My brother is back, so I'm bringing him back on the stage. Finally saw a request. The one thing I want to emphasize here, and I do mean this, I'm going to go to Caleb, but I'm going to kind of bring up something that I said I was going to talk about. And I was asked this question yesterday, and someone just re-asked it now. I already had this written down as a question that I was going to bring up. But the question was, you keep talking about your local market. What if I just learn something valuable, like Flutter, and just get a job somewhere else in America, in the UK, in Australia? Why do I have to focus on my local market? Why don't I just get my first job in tech or a job in tech somewhere else? I'm going to be answering that in a moment. But in the meantime, I'm going to go to Lawrence first, and then we'll go to Caleb. Lawrence hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Caleb has. So I'll go to Lawrence first, and then I'll go to Caleb. It doesn't have to be on the topic I just said, but I just want to put that in folks' mind. Lawrence, go ahead.
Hey, thanks, man, and good morning to you and everyone. Good to see you. And for those that don't know me, my name is Lawrence. I am a developer advocate. Just started last week at a new job at a place called Vaden. I've been 5 years in tech, and I've really enjoyed helping other developers find their wins. Say two quick things, because I think you're kind of in a wrap-up mode. I'm not sure. I just dropped my daughter off for church. But anyway, two quick things, and I'll drop back down. First of all, Heather, I totally feel where you are right now. I'd like to share a couple of quick keys that helped me get my developer advocacy job that I just started. Number one, in the initial stage, I narrowed down to my stack. I refused to apply anywhere that was not my stack, and my stack is Java. I claim it proudly. There's some unique things about that choice, but I don't have time to go into it now, maybe at another time. But I narrowed down to my stack, which is Java. Number two, when I got in the interview, when they asked for examples of writing, examples of video, examples of conference talks, I had examples of all three of those key areas to share them that they liked. That helped me advance to the next level. And the final stage, the thing that really put me over was going deep into their docs and delivering a presentation that showed I had an appreciation for their product. Just wanted to share that with you real quick. Hopefully, at least some of that can help you. And then to my beginners, so my second major point to my beginners who are in the audience working on that first job, just want to emphasize in an overarching way, now more than ever, differentiation is the key. You've already heard all the steps, all the to-dos. What I'm trying to help you understand is differentiation is everything right now. After you've done the projects and put them in the portfolio, after you've done the LinkedIn optimization, the resume optimization, that's just the basic cost of entry. That's not special. That is basic. You're going to have to do something to separate yourself from the noise of the pure number of candidates versus the candidate pool versus the number of job openings. It might be, and I can tell you the people I mentor, the number that I'm helping land jobs this year is down from what I'm used to. I'm still helping people, I'm still having wins, but it's not the same numbers of like 2 years ago at all. And people are doing like all the check marks. So one key person, they did the hack that I talked about, going on LinkedIn, finding a job you're interested in, but rather than applying, finding a person who posted or reposted about it. Sometimes a company will post about a job and then one of their employees or the recruiters will repost it. Having a conversation right there in that public post and getting to know them first is the thing that can separate you. Another young man based in Dallas area, actually, no, he's not Dallas, he's in Austin, I'm sorry. He found a meetup that was sponsored by a huge company that hires lots of developers in the area, attended there for 3 months, met people, got to know people, and then was informed about a job opening when one came up, literally by a person who was at the meetup. So those are just anecdotal examples, but the point is you're going to have to figure out some way to differentiate yourself. And even as Danny mentioned with the projects, the whole thing about just grabbing some public API and just grabbing in some data, there's nothing wrong with that, but taking a step further. Can I process this data and produce something that they haven't seen before? Even at your level, if you give yourself the time to think creatively and dig a little deeper, you can produce something that will make you stand out. Thanks. That's all I have. Got to get dressed. Talk to y'all later.
I appreciate you, Lawrence. And honestly, yeah, like I definitely agree with all the good stuff. By the way, if y'all aren't following Lawrence, I implore you to do so. He's one of my favorite people on this planet. Definitely somebody I plan to know for the rest of my life. Amazing human being. And I think definitely will improve your timeline by following him. So big shout outs to Lawrence. Caleb, go ahead.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, I always like when Lawrence gets up here and talks. He's like has his concise points, says it so clearly. I love that when I hear you in this space, man. I just wanted to go back to the person who asked about they learned React and JavaScript, and then they found their market was different. I just wanted to share, like, for me, I actually learned Java when I was learning how to program. And then when I got my first job outside of college at GE, it wasn't a software engineering role, but there was some development in the role, and that's kind of how I started learning JavaScript on the job at the time. And so even for me, I had to transition the knowledge I have from Java and my basics of programming courses to a whole new language in the web. And back then was even using jQuery, and there wasn't even React yet, or it wasn't as popular. And then as that journey like continued on, it went from jQuery and fundamental or vanilla JavaScript to then a library that Google had at the time called Polymer that GE decided to choose and use for all of their internal applications. And then a year later, React was the one that started getting popular. And so I think for you, I just want to give you hope that one good thing about learning how to program is the basics of programming can be generally transformed and transferred to other programming languages like Java to JavaScript, like loops, switch statements, if statements, like those kinds of things are going to be transferred to different languages. And then you can just take the time to learn some of those differences and some of the current techniques people are using in applications as the language evolves. And that thankfully will get you most of the way there as you have to learn something else for your market. And so I just wanted to give you an example, even for me and the challenge I had going from Java to JavaScript, which the most challenging part was like a typed language to the scripting language that made no sense to me at all when I started. And so I just wanted to share that with you, and hopefully that helps you get some confidence and motivates you a little bit when you're doing your own switch.
Yep. And to be honest, this is one thing I try to emphasize to folks. That's why I don't try to put too much emphasis on the actual language or tool, because it's going to constantly morph and change, and depending on what's the big thing in the industry at that time, it may be something completely different, right? So now I will say with a lot of enterprise level companies, they don't necessarily make quick changes for the most part, right? Like it's very well calculated, thought out. And prime example of this, and I use this example often because I think this was a really big one. I've been on tech Twitter now for 3 years? And I remember when Dino came out, Dino.js, the hype that it developed on tech Twitter was unlike anything I had seen at the time, right? Like I've never seen everyone go crazy for it. And I remember specifically that everyone was touting Dino is the node killer. Dino will kill node. And it will no longer be the MERN stack, but it will be the MERD stack, right? I saw course creators drop what they were doing to create courses for Dino. I got constant messages and comments of, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Dino, everyone's saying Dino's going to kill MERN. Should I stop learning Node and learn Dino? La, da, da. And I said, everybody calm down. If Dino is the node killer, let's say it is. If it is, do you think Fortune 500 companies are going to literally re-architect their entire code base simply because Dino's the flavor of the month? And let's say they do. Do you think that's going to happen overnight? And let's say if they do, even then, do you think that there are not going to be concepts in Node that are transferable to Dino? And that they'll look like, well, we know Dino is new, so we know we can't always get Dino developers right away. So we'll go ahead and take these Node developers and give them time to, upskill and go. The concepts will transfer over. Stay where you're at. Because if you switch now, you'll regret it. 3 months later, I didn't see a single tweet about Dino. Now, I'm not saying Dino is bad. I'm not saying Dino is dead. That's a different conversation altogether. But what I am saying is, if the people believed the hype, they would have stopped learning MERN. And then what would have happened? They would be further behind on their learning career. Now, again, I will say, though, if you are learning MERN and you're not in a market that supports MERN in that regard, you're probably doing yourself a very large disservice. That's just me being honest. And it goes back to the thing earlier where I said, do the research into your market and find out if it applies. If MERN is not in demand, you're basically stacking the deck against you. I'd rather you focus on stacking the deck in your favor as opposed to allowing a tower of cards to fall on you because you're simply not learning what companies are hiring for. And you need to think about one thing specifically here, right? When it comes to hiring in general, who do you think is going to hire the most junior devs? Is it going to be the mom and pop ad agency that hires like a junior dev every quarter or every half a year? Or is it going to be the enterprise level Fortune 500 kind of company that hires like 50 at a time and they have entire systems built out where they onboard juniors and take them through a path? Where are you going to find the most amount of success? Who's going to do the more frequent amount of hiring? These are things you need to think about. One prime example here, right? And they're in the Dallas area, but they also have like different cities and locations. JP Morgan. They have a program that's literally called the Emerging Talent Software Developer Program, and they hire devs that come from untraditional backgrounds. They have other programs too, but this is just one of them that come from untraditional backgrounds like bootcamp, self-taught, etc. And they basically onboard them. They guarantee them 2 years of employment and support. It's a junior dev role, but it's marketed differently where they want to support you more. So they dedicate time every single week where you have a mentor, where you have teaching, support, pair programming, et cetera, for 2 years. That's an enterprise level company. They just hired several hundred junior devs versus the mom and pop shop that may hire 1 or 2, right? That's what I like to think about when it comes to me choosing the stack and the method that I'm trying to go down. Where am I going to have the largest amount of opportunity creating something for me, or at least increasing the odds of me landing something, especially when we're talking about our very first job? Things can be different when you have the experience and you have connections and a network and you're down the road. But especially when we're highlighting the very first opportunity, we need to think about that. It's something that's very important to think about. Where am I going to find the most amount of opportunities to at least get onboarded and hopefully have something great happen, right? So for me, I'm constantly thinking about that. Hopefully you're thinking about that as well when you're thinking about the strategy. Because again, we're not just waking up like it's a brand new accident, and we're not applying to jobs like it's an accident. We're being very intentful. Act like you got a purpose here and do something with it, right? Don't just blindly go into just throwing stuff against the wall and like, oh, this stuck? Cool. That's what I'm going. No. That's why a lot of people end up searching for things for years at a time, months at a time. We don't need that to be the case here. I saw a bunch of hands up and a bunch of hands disappeared. Either I answered everything that people were going to say, or, okay, Kyle, go ahead.
I'm only putting it up because the other folks put their hands back down. So if y'all, got better stuff to say, I just wanted to come and defend Dino for a second. Y'all, Dino did die. Like everything you said was true, right? Like it came up and then it died. And I know this is off topic. I just want to let people know, go check it out because it's coming up again. Like it's on round 2 right now. They came out with Dino Deploy. Netlify uses edge functions. There's some cool stuff going on with Dino. I would recommend checking it out.
Yeah. I'm not here to talk bad about a language tool. To be honest, I love all languages, all tools. I don't really have any favoritism, if I'm being honest. I always said, if you got a paycheck with my name on it, I'll learn whatever you want me to learn. I have no problem. You want me to be a Python developer and you got a paycheck with it? Cool. That's exactly what I'm going to do. You want me to be a C# developer and write some .NET code? Cool. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Simple as that. Like my tech stack in general started at Java Angular. Then it became Golang and React. Then it became Android out of nowhere. And then from there, went back to Java and React. I have no problem writing any of it. It doesn't bother me one bit. So what I look for is opportunity, growth. And if you're paying me to learn something new and increase my skill set, I'm all about it. So it doesn't bother me at all. And that's what this field is. You're literally getting paid to learn and apply those learnings. So it doesn't bother me. I'll go to YK, and then I'm going to answer the question that I alluded to earlier. YK, go ahead.
Yeah, I raised my hand earlier because of what you said about, these X killers, like different things killers on Twitter. It's just totally ridiculous. Dino is going to kill Node. PyScript is going to kill JavaScript. There was like a trend there. And I think more advanced learners and, technologists understand that they don't usually end up killing these things, but beginners might get confused. And I think that's one downside of this app, right? Because it is hard for beginners, to kind of distinguish that sometimes. But definitely be mindful of that. If someone says like, oh, yeah, this thing is X killer, or this thing is gonna kill this other thing, like someone was saying Copilot is gonna kill the developer job, and then ChatGPT is gonna kill the developer job. The whole thing is just totally ridiculous. Yeah, just wanted to comment on that. And I would say, for beginners, for junior devs, um, don't worry about it so much. If you're curious about a certain piece of technology, it's totally fine to learn about it, just for fun. But if your primary objective is to learn something to get a job, then it all comes back to what Danny was saying earlier about researching your local market, looking at the job postings. And if you start seeing like HTMX on those job postings, on the majority of them, then that's probably a good thing to learn. But otherwise, stick to the basics, I would say.
100%. Also, side note, there are two things pinned at the top of the space. One of them is the thread that I mentioned the other day about how the 7 steps to landing your first job in tech. Is very long, but I think it's worth it. The other thing that is up there now is what I promised earlier, the Udemy giveaway. Thanks to AppRite, they're supporting me and all that good stuff. So they're giving me the funds to do another Udemy giveaway, even though I just did one like a week and a half ago. Now, so you could go ahead in there right now, comment, share, all the good stuff. One thing I want to add to that. When I looked last night, it was on sale. I just looked right now and I don't see anything on sale. So I'm probably going to pick the winners and I'll send them the courses as soon as it goes on sale. So just want to be transparent about that. But I was not expecting that to be the case right now when I went to Udemy's homepage. But regardless, I promised it, so it's there. Hopefully everybody will be understanding of that, which I've never had a problem with before. No one's ever been mad about that. Regardless, it's there. I want to hit on one topic or one question, and then I think we'll wrap up this space. The question was, why do I need to learn what's in demand in my local market? Why can't I just learn something and then apply to those jobs in other countries where it's in demand? This is a common talking point, especially on Twitter. Like, I don't ever really have this question, except on Twitter. Everywhere else, it's pretty obvious, like the strategy or path that they're going to take. It's only on Twitter do we hit on everyone, no matter where you're from in the world, everyone's getting a remote job. The reality is, it's so damn hard to get a remote job. It's ridiculously hard. Your biggest asset and value is the fact that you are a local developer. That's the biggest value add that you have. Once you say you are going to be a remote developer and you're going to get a job somewhere else, number one, you are now competing with the entire global marketplace. You're not just competing with folks around you. So you go from situations of having a few hundred applicants to tens of thousands of applicants. I was talking to a buddy of mine who is a recruiter here in Dallas, and they had a remote position. They announced the position at 11 a.m. By the end of business at 5 p.m., they had over 9,000 applications for a remote role. 9,000. That's in 6 hours. Do you not see the competition that you're going against? That's number one. Number two, there is zero incentive for a company to hire a junior developer in a foreign country. We've already established earlier in this space that when you hire a junior developer, that a company is losing money. When they hire a junior developer, they are losing time and money, but they're willing to do it because they say this person probably is going to have less of an onboarding time. They're going to require less hand-holding. They're going to be more up to speed on certain things. So it makes more sense for me to invest in this person now because I know they'll be making valuable contributions soon. When I have to hire someone who's in a completely different market, in a different country, in a different city or part of the world altogether, where's the value add for me losing that money? There isn't one. It doesn't make financial sense. It doesn't make sense to now have to deal with government regulations and red tape and jump through all of these hoops to hire somebody in another country. It doesn't make sense. the incentive would be to hire somebody in my local market. And for even some groups in some cities, there's even tax breaks for hiring local people. It makes no sense to do that on a candidate that you're more than likely going to be losing money on. Even though this is against the Twitter narrative, it's the actual narrative. 95% chance you are not going to be in another country, working in another country for your very first job. I leave that 5% there because I don't believe anything is impossible. Anything is possible. But the reality is, more than likely, it's not going to be the case for vast majority of people. You need to start focusing more on your local markets. And that's just the truth. Because think about it. If you were to apply to jobs in Dallas, do you know how many people in Dallas already exist that are looking for junior jobs? So you're competing against those local folks, but then you're competing against everybody else that saw the exact same remote listing that you saw. Why would they go for you? What do you have that sets you apart from, in this case, 9,000 remote positions or remote applicants that applied within 6 hours? It's very hard to do that. Now, it's different when you have a lot more experience, because then they're saying, I can hire a dev in, let's say, Nigeria, and pay them, something that's good in their cost of living area, but significantly less than our cost of living area. Maybe I can even get 2 of those devs for the same price of 1 here. That makes sense. That's financially, it makes sense to go through the government regulations, to go through all the hoops. Like, that makes perfect sense. I'll do that. Especially when we're talking about they have 4 years of experience each, 5 years of experience. They're not going to require hand-holding. They're not going to require people guiding them and taking time and then breaking stuff. That's not a concern anymore. So that is a lot more appealing to them than the other way. So going back to what I said before, that is exactly why you need to learn an in-demand stack. That is exactly why you need to know the demands of your local market. I can tell you what you want to hear. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, you can get all the remote jobs. You don't even know. Yeah, you don't even need to know back-end languages. You go for the front-end roles. You're going to get it. Everybody and their mother, brother, sister, cousin, and son and nephew is learning React right now. It's the most in-demand library in the world right now. That doesn't set you apart. I know Twitter will tell you different. Just learn that and you're going to get all the jobs. That's not setting you apart. And to be honest with you, over like the last 18 months alone, I've seen less and less people land front-end only positions as opposed to full stack. That also probably goes against a lot of the narrative on Twitter, but that's the reality. Like, I've just seen significantly fewer people land front-end roles as opposed to maybe 3 years ago. Because everybody knows front-end now. It's been the flavor of the month for a while. You need to know something that sets you apart. You need to build up your skill set. And it's really going to be hard for you to do that if you're just focused on doing the absolute bare minimum. And also, with doing that bare minimum, you're like, man, I'm going to get a job just anywhere doing anything. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme, folks. Like, you need to think about something, right? We're coming up on an hour and a half of this space. I genuinely, by the way, value my time, right? If you're to go off of my hourly at work, I'll be transparent, I make $137 an hour. So you're basically saying at this point, right, I've lost almost $200 just doing this space. But I do it because my hope is you're getting something of value out of it and you're going to apply it. You're not paying me nothing. Matter of fact, I'm about to lose some more money, by the way, because I'm about to do this Udemy giveaway, right? You're not giving me a paycheck for doing this stuff. I'm doing it because the only way I get to really get excited about this is by helping you land a job or get an opportunity, and I get to celebrate that for a couple seconds. That's the value add to me. So please don't think that anyone here is saying something that's to discourage you, to put you down, or distract you. The reality is, I need to tell you exactly what you need to hear so we can make the right moves as opposed to the moves that sound good. My moves often require you to do a little bit of work, unfortunately, and that's just the reality of it. But truthfully, actually, I'll go to Kyle before I finish this point because then we'll close out the space. Kyle, go ahead.
Just keeping it real, I thought I'd share another fact that maybe folks are not aware of. Did you know Netflix does not hire junior developers? Not only does Netflix not hire junior developers, Netflix only hires senior and staff level developers. So if that was on your list and you consider yourself a junior developer, just know that, you know, some of these companies out here don't even hire, and that's not a secret, by the way. You can look that up. That's just a just a thing. You know, some places know that they don't want to deal with training people, like as messed up as that kind of sounds, right? Like they have certain things, certain goals they can afford the best, and so they do.
Yep. Caleb, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Kyle. I don't like to usually say anybody is wrong on a space. Well, I happen to work at Netflix, so I just have the intel, if you call it that. But we started hiring new grads in lower level positions. So of course it's very competitive for any Netflix role. But I just wanted to highlight that just in case people actually do want to hire go for jobs at lower levels these days.
I apologize. That information came from me from a good friend that works at Netflix as well. Maybe it's outdated. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's very, very recent that different levels that were introduced at Netflix.
Cool. And you know what's interesting? Because I even said that at the beginning of the space, right? Like if I ever hear something that could be on the error of bad advice, not that the person has malicious intent, but we like to clear it up. I love the way that y'all handled that. So, and plus, Caleb being the source, works there, so that kind of helps out too, right? I don't think Kyle said that in a negative way, but I also do think, regardless, the point still stands. Like, I don't want to say it's competitive. I mean, I do say it's competitive. I don't want to say it's impossible because nothing's impossible. But I do think, for a lot of people, the big thing that I'm really trying to get focused on here is the mindset shift, right? And before I go down this, I just want to remind everybody, I recorded this space. I don't often do that. If you think people get value out of this in any way, shape, or form, share it out. Because after we end this, obviously it's just going to be there. But please do. What is this? Almost 300 people in here. Thank you so much for hanging out. But the thing that I'm really trying to get people to focus on is you need to de-risk yourself as an applicant. You need to really, really, really focus on what are you doing to showcase, I've got the skill set, I've got the tools, I can prove that I know what I say that I know, and I've got this, right? If you look at the thread up above, I think a lot of the items in there is going to help you out doing that. But the reality is you're an investment. You're literally an investment. And your goal now should be, how do I de-risk myself to the point where I'm a safe investment, right? If you just have the bare minimum, and that is all you've done, it's very hard to look at that and say, this is the kind of person I want to hire immediately. It's difficult to do that. Why would you want to do that? There's no incentive for that. Please give yourself a fighting chance. Like, that's the thing that hurts me the most is when I look at folks and they're like, I've been trying to get a job for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And then you're not even giving yourself a fighting chance to actually stand out and do something with it, right? And now I come from a position of I've been doing this for a while. I've helped over 1,000 people land a job in tech. I get it, right? But dang, some of this stuff, you look at it and you're like, this should be obvious. Your portfolio site literally looks like it was put together in Microsoft Paint, right? How does that make you look when you're trying to go for a front end role? No one's saying you got to be a designer, but dang, you can't go steal a design off a Dribble and recreate it or something like that. You can't use a template and use something. We need something there to showcase that we know what front end design looks like. That's something you need to be thinking about. How is it coming across? Are you a back-end developer and the only thing that you made was a CLI thing that basically does adding numbers together? Come on, what are we doing here? You can add something more of substance as opposed to where you're going. That should be your ultimate focus here. De-risk yourself. You literally need to be thinking about this intentfully. Are these projects showcasing my tech skills? Is the project that I'm leading into interviews with, is this going to be the thing that really showcases my abilities here? Is my project going to be something that actually gets people talking to me about it and asking questions? Or are they going to look at that and be like, oh, it's a weather app. Yeah, I've seen 10,000 YouTube videos on this. One thing, especially as a beginner, I want you to think about this. We're all developers. We all see the JavaScript tutorials out there. We see the same ones over and over. Hell, we've probably done most of them ourselves. Think about the audience that you're going to be talking to. Your project doesn't necessarily need to be the exact same thing you see everybody else creating. At the very least, you need to have one project that truly solves a problem, delivers a solution, and allows you to talk about that solution. That's what we need to be thinking about. And I don't care what area of tech you're in, that applies, right? I don't care if you're working in cloud. Even if you're a designer and you're just developing designs, your designs need to be focused on certain things from a business aspect, like customer conversion rates. Where can we apply XYZ to help increase visibility on ABC? Like you're not just designing something cool, funky, and different. It has to have a purpose. It's the same thing with design. It's the same thing with front end, same thing with back end, the same thing with cloud. Like, think about that. One thing I really want to push into here, right? Everything that you're setting up is for one big thing, right? And when you're building all this stuff out, you need to think about one key word, by the way: positioning. Everything should be positioning you to talk about things in the interview, to talk about things with employers, to talk about things with other developers. Position. When you apply for a job, they don't just hire a private investigator to say, I need to find out everything about Caleb. They're not doing that. They're going off your LinkedIn, your resume, your information that you're providing. If you don't over-deliver in the beginning, it's really hard to develop questions around that. So they may ask you questions that you're not necessarily prepared for, and it may put you on the back foot of things as opposed to leading and controlling that interview a little bit. Think about that. Over-deliver on the information. And one thing I want you to really think about, and we'll kind of end the space on this note because I think it's a valuable one. Everything that you're doing right now, you're doing it, by the way, especially in America, when we talk about just America alone, only 4.2% of the country works in STEM, right? Regarding computer science. 4.2%. You're literally knowing and doing something 96% of the country can't know and do. There's value in that. Recognize that. Celebrate yourself a little bit. It's huge. 96% of the country can't do it. So there's value in that. Recognize it and act like it. Act accordingly. You are not invaluable. You are valuable. You aren't worthless. You aren't thrown to the side. There's inherent value in what you bring to the conversation and the table. Pay attention to that and act like it. Some of y'all out here are literally begging for stuff when you should be in there controlling the conversations. You're out here literally putting yourself down. Think about this. You know how many times a day I get a message, I'll work for free. I'll work for you for 6 months for free. Number one, I'm not in a hiring role. I don't hire for my company. But number two, if you said you would work for free, what do you think my first instinct is? They're going to need a lot of training. They're going to need a lot of work. They're going to need a lot of help. That doesn't come across as valuable. Act like you got value. Stop going into these conversations begging please just give me a chance. I need a chance. Give me a chance. Please, please, please. Instead, you should be saying, I'm valuable. I know my skill set. I can add value to this company. I can add value to this team. And if you give me the opportunity, I'll add so much value that you're going to fall in love with me. That should be your mindset. So many of y'all have this completely backwards. I'm not saying you need to go in there saying, you give me 15 minutes, I'll show you how I can save 15% or more. You're not a Geico commercial. But one thing I want you to understand, you are literally one yes from changing your life. You're literally one yes away from changing your career. You're literally one yes away from changing the circumstances of your family. Give them a damn reason to say it, though. Some of y'all won't even give them the reason to say yes. Some of y'all are almost you're in a stance to sabotage yourself so much that you won't get out your own damn way for someone to recognize how incredible and valuable you are. Get out of your own damn way. Put your fingers on that keyboard, let them dance around a little bit, and be very intentful about what it is that you're doing. Stop waking up like it's a brand new accident every single day of the week. Tomorrow is Monday. Today is Sunday. I'm acting like today that I'm clocking into work and I'm going to put some work in. I'm building up my skill set. I believe that you should work hard at your job, but you need to work harder on yourself because a job can tell you what they'll pay you, but only you can dictate your value. Simple as that. Keep improving yourself. Give me a reason to celebrate your success. Please, I want it. I genuinely am here because I love all y'all, except Kyle. I love all y'all. So please understand that I just want to see you succeed. Give me a reason to do it. And if I don't talk to you anytime between now and then, just recognize and understand you absolutely got this, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.